Hi, this is Sarit Switzer, and welcome to the It Is Taught podcast, a podcast devoted to the teachings of Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi as recorded in his most famous work, the Tanya. My hope for this show is to make these teachings accessible and relatable to the average person, regardless of prior Jewish education or affiliation. The episodes follow the prescribed daily study portions and are meant to serve as practical lessons in how to live your life as your true self and develop an authentic and powerful relationship with your Creator. I have personally experienced the effects the study of this work has had on me, and I'm excited to share what I can of this knowledge with you. So please join me on this journey of learning, self-growth, and connection with your source. Hi, and welcome to the It Is Taught podcast. This is episode 326 for the 19th of Tishrei in a leap year. Today we are going to talk about the advantage of being human as opposed to an angel. So why? What could possibly be advantageous about being human to being an angel? So it turns out that there are actually many advantages, but the primary advantage that we're going to be talking about today is actually in regards to the limited perception that we have in terms of being a human being and the advantage that this gives us. So angels are by nature more spiritually sensitive. They're more spiritually perceptible. They see things that we don't see as humans due to our limited, finite physical eyes. But because of that, we are actually able to handle more than angels are, spiritually speaking, due to our limited perception. So what we'll learn about today is actually a certain level of spirituality, spiritual descent, spiritual influence that happens that we can experience as humans on a certain level, but yet angels cannot experience it, because if they were to experience it in the way that we do, they would actually expire. They wouldn't be able to handle it. So what is it that I'm talking about? If you've been following along the podcast for the past few days, the subject, if you may have noticed, of these past few days is the idea of Jews studying together, Jews studying Torah together, specifically 10 Jews studying Torah together, and the special power that this has. And we learned about how 10 Jews, when 10 Jews study together, or even as we'll learn, when 10 Jews just even come together and gather together, just are in each other's presence, this actually draws down what's known as the Shechina, the divine indwelling, in a very powerful way that nothing else can. That if one person sits and studies Torah, as much as they might be able to draw down a certain amount of spiritual influence into their own soul in accordance with their soul level, the Shechina, the divine indwelling, which is like God himself in terms of how he relates to the world, this is something that can only be drawn down through 10 Jews coming together and 10 Jews studying Torah together. And this Shechina is such a powerful thing that the Jews, when Jews gather together in such a manner and draw down the Shechina through their communal Torah study or their communal mitzvah doing, it's actually not something that they can feel, even though this does happen, but it's not something that's perceptible to them. It's not something, this is how it's different than that subjective experience, which we spoke about yesterday, that happens when one Jew studies Torah on their own. There is a certain subjective spirituality that a person feels, that a person gets inspired in a way that is very in line with their soul due to that Torah study that they learn. Here in this case, when we have 10 Jews studying together, the power that comes down, the spiritual energy that comes down is in fact so powerful, that it's not something that's perceptible to them. But it does happen, and it's something that will only truly perceive in the future time in the world to come. And angels, since angels can actually sense these kind of things on a deeper spiritual level than we can, it's actually taught that if an angel were to come and experience these 10 Jews gathering together, it would be too much for them to handle and they would actually expire. So let's get into the text and see how the Alter Rebbe explains all of this. And for context, we are still in the middle of Epistle 23 of Iggeres HaKodesh. And we've been learning again about the spiritual effects of of what happens when 10 Jews get together and learn Torah or do mitzvahs, or even just get together and gather together. And we contrasted this with the effect of what happens when one person just on their own sits and studies Torah, which still does create a very tremendous spiritual effect. And we spoke about that yesterday, but today we're going to focus on the effects that happens with 10 Jews. And the wording, the different wording for these two things is that with 10 Jews, what happens is what's called a hashra, an indwelling of the divine presence, versus for one person, it's called schar, reward. So today we're going to focus on that hashra, the divine indwelling. And so what is this hashra? What is this divine indwelling of the Shechina? This is the intense radiation that comes from the light of God that shines in the light of the soul without any end and without any limit. So yesterday we talked about how the reward that happens when one person studies Torah individually does come about in a limited way, because the soul, even though it's spiritual, is limited nevertheless. And so the radiance that it draws down is limited and appropriate proportion to the soul. But here in this case, when we talk about the radiance that's drawn down, when we have 10 Jews, it's unlimited. It's not, it's without end. And so since it's an unlimited radiance, it's not able to be vested within the soul, which the soul is limited, but rather it just encompasses it from above, from its head to its feet. As the sages taught, of blessed memory taught, and this is a teaching from the Gemara in Masechet Sanhedrin, page 39a, where it says that the Shechina hovers over every gathering of 10 Jews. So it's specific, the wording is specific that it hovers above them. It doesn't vest itself within them the way it does in when we're talking about the one Jew studying Torah. And as it says in Tehillim chapter 90 verse 17, quotes the Alter Rebbe, where it says, "Vayihi noam Hashem aleinu u'maaseh yedenu kunna aleinu." May the pleasantness of the Lord our God be upon us, establish upon us the work of our hands. So it's this idea of upon us, resting upon us. So it's from above, meaning to say that the pleasantness of God, which appears in the work of our hands, Maaseh Yedenu, through learning Torah and doing mitzvahs, this like hovers upon them. So why? Because we know that the Torah and God are one and the same, and so it rests upon a person from above. When a person is involved in Torah study and mitzvahs, then since God and Torah are one and the same, then God rests upon them from above. Since God is without limit or ends, and thus God himself is not able to invest himself within our souls and within our minds in this limited way. And so this is why we don't understand with our intellects the sweetness of God, the pleasantness of God, and the ray of the Shechina that is truly without limit and without and that's infinite. But rather it just rests upon us through our work in Torah and mitzvahs, specifically speaking, when we do this in public, when we learn Torah, when we're involved in mitzvahs in a communal way. And this, says the Alter Rebbe, this is what is referred to when we learn in the Gemara in Kedushin, page 39b, this idea of schal mitzvah b'hai alma leka, that in this world, there's no reward for the performance of the commandments. So there's that word reward, right? So we talked about how an individual who sits and studies Torah on their own, they do receive a reward. That reward is that subjective experience of enthusiasm that they get that's very tailor-made and catered to their soul. But when we talk about the communal learning of Torah, there's no reward for that, meaning to say, at least not here in this world, because here we're talking about an infinite radiance, something that's coming from the Shechina, the radiance of the Shechina, which is infinite in nature, and that cannot manifest itself in our finite souls. So it has to encompass us from above. The world cannot comprehend it, but rather this can only happen. The only way that we can comprehend these things is when the soul is divested from the body, and we're not in this physical. We're not bound by physicality here. The soul is not bound by the physical body down here. However, nevertheless, by way of kindness, so through a kindness, as it says, and this is a citation from Tehillim chapter 62, verse 13, where it says, Ulcha Hashem chesed, ki ata teshalem leish k'ma'asehu. Kindness, O God, is yours, for you render to every man according to his work. So, meaning to say that even though it really would not make sense for us to receive as a reward, meaning us to receive, we can equate reward here. We can make it synonymous with the idea of subjective experience. It's impossible for us to subjectively experience the Shechina, which is infinite, right? That it's kind of like, it doesn't make sense that we'd be able to do that. Nevertheless, due to the kindness of God, then we know that God actually gave this power to the tzaddikim to have this reward, to have this subjective experience in the world to come. So it's true that right now in this physical world, in this reality that we live in, we cannot experience this. We cannot have this subjective experience of God. But nevertheless, God, out of kindness, he made it so that we could experience this, at least for the tzaddikim, they can experience this in the world to come, which is not the case, concludes the Alter Rebbe, in the case of the angels. As he says that he learned from his masters, meaning the Baal Shem Tov and the Magid, which were the teachers of the Alter Rebbe, that if even one angel were to come and stand in amongst 10 Jews who were standing together, even if they were not speaking words of Torah. So if an angel came to a gathering of 10 Jews who were just like hanging out, not even speaking words of Torah, these angels, that a fright and a terror would fall upon them that would be so infinite and boundless, due to the Shechina that was resting upon them, that this angel would actually become nullified in his source completely. So that's the end of the section. So once again, so just to reiterate this all, so the basic idea is that there is a very tremendous light that comes down, and whenever 10 Jews come together, especially if they're learning Torah, if they're involved in mitzvahs, but even towards the end, it's even if they're just like standing together, if they're just hanging out together, the power of 10 Jews coming together to such an extent that this is something that we cannot experience subjectively, because it's something that just, it's an unlimited radiance from the Shechina, so it cannot become manifest within our souls, which are limited by our bodies. So it's only something that people can experience after they pass away, after they're no longer encumbered by their bodies. And angels also cannot handle it. Angels can't handle it at all, because angels are much more sensitive and much more perceptible. So if an angel were to be within the vicinity of 10 Jews hanging out in this way, they would expire. A question does come up. I'll just leave this off as like a little addendum, that the Rebbe brought this question up of like, we do see instances of like angels being present when 10 Jews are around. So how does this work exactly? The Alter Rebbe doesn't address this here, and he doesn't answer this question, but it is kind of something just to think about. Maybe it is answered somewhere else, how on the one hand, the Alter Rebbe is saying that he learned that an angel would not be able to handle Jews standing together and it would expire. But on the other hand, we know that there are instances that angels are around. So how does that work exactly? But the main point that we should be left with is just to really get a sense of just the loftiness and the intensity of the radiance that comes down upon Jews when we gather together in a group of 10. So that's it for today, and we will continue along these lines tomorrow, and I will speak to you then. Thanks for listening to the It Is Taught podcast, hosted by Sarit Switzer. This podcast is dedicated in loving memory of my maternal grandfather, Avraham Yitzchak ben Binyamin HaKohen of blessed memory. Music by Shechina. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to support the show, please share it with others and subscribe on YouTube, Apple iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And make sure to leave us a 5-star review. To find out more about the It Is Taught project, including more information on my soon-to-be published book, please visit our website, itistaught.com. To catch the latest from me, follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Looking forward to speaking with you tomorrow, and until then, have a great day.